Top 5, a show where we count things down from number 5 all the way to number 1. And this week on the show, well, we did the top 5 movies that begin with the letter C. This week on the show, the top 5 movies that begin with the letter D. Movies that begin with the letter D. Matthew, what do you have for your number 5?
My number 5 is actually a movie from, I think, this year. Well, maybe last year. Yes, 2024. It is a movie that I saw just yesterday. And it is my number 5 because it is stuck in my head. My number 5 is a thriller called Don't Move. And Don't Move is the story of a young woman who is in the process of jumping to her death because she had a loss in her family when a serial killer catches her and tells her to stop and talks her down off the ledge. And she thinks, oh, this is fine, but she doesn't know he's a serial killer. And then he injects her with a paralytic. So the majority of this movie, probably 2/3 of this movie, is the main actress, a woman named Kelsey Asbill, motionless except for her eyes. And she acts with just her eyes. It is truly freaky. I have to say that I was really impressed. I thought it was going to be kind of a silly movie where we'd have a lot of goofy stuff going on, but it was really tense and it was really close up. And of course, there's a scene where she's lying in the tall grass. She's barely escaped and lost all feeling in her limbs. And then we hear a lawnmower. There's a farmer who's out mowing his lawn. And this scene goes on and on. And I won't tell you how it ends, but I got to tell you, this is a really, really fun movie. I don't know if I'd call it a horror movie or a thriller or just sort of a terrible people doing terrible things kind of movie. But if you have not seen Don't Move, I think it's streaming. I'm sure I saw it streaming. I've just been lately going, hey, show me a new movie. And that's what I got. Don't Move.
Very good. Rodrigo, what do you have for your number 5?
My number 5 is okay. So the way that I came up with this list is like, what movies that start with D would I be willing to like watch right now?
Yeah,
that I wouldn't be like, you know what I'm saying. So my number 5 is Dune Part 2. Came out 2024. It's the sequel to Dunk, of course. You know what I mean. And it's just kind of the reason why Dune 2 and not 1 is here is because I really feel like the first Dune had to get through a lot of exposition, and then this one kind of gets a little bit more into the meat. We see different locations. We finally see kind of a lot of the stuff that was like hinted at in the first one. I think it's just a movie that, again, not being so hindered by exposition. It still has a ton of exposition, but not being so hindered by exposition kind of gets to do what it wants.
Yeah.
And that's be a epic action movie, which it totally achieves, I think.
Very cool. All right. My number 5 is from 1982. It stars Steve Martin, and it is a parody / send-up to film noir and pulp detective films of the 1940s called Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. Now, the premise of this is that Steve Martin is a detective, and intercut throughout the film are clips from other noir movies. Like there's a bit where Steve Martin will pick up the phone and he's talking to somebody, and we cut to a scene from a Humphrey Bogart movie, or we cut to a movie with Veronica Lake or Alan Ladd, and Steve Martin just has these interactions with these classic film people, and they do a pretty good job of trying to match the contrast of a movie from the 1940s with a movie from the 1980s. Obviously, it's shot on film, but I'm guessing they're not shooting it on the same stock of film that they would have in the 1940s, but it's still good. And it's a comedy. There's a bit that I show my students about comedy sometimes is taking things a little bit too far. and then to where it's it's funny, and then you push it a little bit too far, and then it's not funny, and then you keep pushing it, and then it becomes funny again. If anybody has seen the scene where Steve Martin is making coffee, it still cracks me up today. If you haven't seen Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, I think you can get it on a streaming service somewhere. It is hysterical, and I think everybody should check it out. That is my number 5 movie that begins with the letter D. Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. We are moving up into our number 4s, and Matthew, I'm curious what you have for number 4.
All right, so I need to preface this with a quiet, please don't judge me, because my list of movies that start with D was difficult because you can't just like go and search like D. You can't
actually you can't just actually literally go into Google and say list all the movies that begin with the letter D, and you will get a Wikipedia page.
An unmanageable mess.
No, it's totally manageable. They actually break it down by all the D's. Like they've got it by DA, DE,
DAA, DHAA.
It's a really great search. It's totally
and if you want to spend 6 days going through it, so I'm just like, what's a good plan? And I started thinking about my youth. And I was born in the year 1970, a far, far flung year. I think really the biggest thing 1970 had to offer was that was the model of Charger that they used for the General Lee on the Dukes of Hazzard. Now, we don't talk about the General Lee anymore. It has been canceled, and for good reason. But when I was in high school, we had, the thing that high school people had. And occasionally when you're in high school, you're like, what's the word I'm looking for? You're like a big sack of hormones. And so people would, make jokes about things that were risque. And one of the things that kept coming up was a 1978 movie called Debbie Does Dallas. Not 1D, not 2Ds, my friends. This is the much lauded triple D, if you will. And I've never seen Debbie Does Dallas, but I can tell you that I have seen references, constant verbal tics of it. I have seen bits and pieces of things that clearly do have some influence. And most importantly, the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders, which were a huge, huge deal in probably 1977 through about 1981. They were like a cultural force. It was a thing where you could, oh my gosh, the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders are here. I don't know if we have a comparison these days, except maybe like, I don't know, idol groups. Imagine Blackpink, only they're all blonde and they're probably all named Joni.
Blonde.
But, yeah, exactly. Debbie Does Dallas is a pornographic movie. And I didn't check to see if it got any type of official rating, whether it was ever like actually released into the world.
Oh yeah, but in the 1970s, porn was very mainstream. Porn was like an acceptable thing to go and watch.
Did it get an X? I don't even remember. But I do know that Debbie Does Dallas was a major cultural touchstone for me at a point where I had no context for what it actually was. And so having, again, not seen the whole movie or not really, I'm sure if I went, I could probably see it right now on the YouTube, right after the Wikipedia page that Stephen has with the Ds. But if nothing else, it is a movie that I feel it made a big enough splash in the zeitgeist that when I said that name, even people who were born 10, 12, 30 years after that film were like, oh, I've heard of that. And then they start judging me. So again, please don't judge me.
Okay. Now that everyone's done judging Matthew, Rodrigo, what do you have for your number 4?
Debbie Does Dallas doesn't show up on IMDb. It's
really
interesting.
Poor Debbie. I wonder what she's doing these days.
All right. So
you don't want to know. No, seriously, you don't want to know.
I never managed to get all the way to 3Ds, but I have a couple that are rocking at least 2.
Mm-hmm.
And my number 4 is a movie that I recently watched again a couple of times because of work. I'd mentioned before that because of my job, sometimes I end up watching a movie, like a specific movie, several times. And it really gives me an opportunity to analyze the movie or pull my hair out in the case of some movies, but not this one. This is a movie that I started watching and I was like, oh, I remember seeing this a long time ago. But it is just so incredibly watchable. Like at all times, there's always like a sad teenager on screen, and there's like sexy dancing, but it's all set to like music from like the 60s. And I was like, I thought this movie was from the 80s, but there's only like one song from the 80s in it. I'm talking about Dirty Dancing, 1997 Dirty Dancing. A movie that people are very nostalgic for, but I feel very few people remember the main conflict of it centers around an illegal abortion.
Mm-hmm.
So I, watching it, I'm like, oh, wow, look at this. Dirty Dancing has something to say. But yeah, it's a really solid movie. Great soundtrack, but I feel like it's cheating, right? Like it's just like let's pour in like all of these great songs. And it's like the movie by itself is fine. Its own song, its own original song, won some awards as well. But yeah, if you just get in all the hits from the 60s and early 70s, then it feels like a little bit of a cheat to say that this movie has a great soundtrack. Great needle drops, I guess, is a good way of putting it. My number 4, Dirty Dancing.
Very cool. Now, my number 4 is a detective movie where the main character is part Sherlock Holmes, part James Bond, but also part of a much larger, like people in China know this character and know the movie franchise very well. This particular entry is the one that I like the most of the 3 that have been released in the United States. And it's Detective Dee and the Mystery of the Phantom Flame. Detective Dee, back in the Tang Dynasty, this is like 689, gets released from prison because people are bursting into flame, and the Empress has tasked Dee with figuring out what is causing people to go up like Roman candles, which is weird because they're in China. And so it's a really fun movie if you like mysteries and you like international films and you like, they don't have a whole lot of wire work in it, but there is a little action sequences here and there. Yeah. The Detective Dee series is a lot of fun. And again, Detective Dee and the Phantom Flame is probably the best place to start with that, even though you're going to say, why is this guy in jail? They do a little flashbacks in there, but it's still super, super good. Watch it with the subtitles. Detective Dee and the Mystery of the Phantom Flame came out in 2011. We are now ready for our number 3 movies that begin with the letter D. Matthew, what do you have for number 3?
My number 3 movie is another one, honestly, where I kind of say, please don't judge me. But I feel like I say, please don't judge me in a slightly different way. Because, again, when I started going through movies that started with D, I just started listing in my head all of the things that we've seen recently. And several years ago, somewhere in the last, I don't know, the last 5 years have been a blur. So somewhere between 2024 and the Ying Dynasty, I saw a movie directed by Miguel Arteta, starring Alia Shawkat, who most people I think probably know from Arrested Development, and who is just an absolutely striking woman, and an equally striking woman named Leia Costa. The movie is called Duck Butter. And Duck Butter is the story of a young actress who meets a girl that she's absolutely smitten with, and they decide that they are going to spend 24 hours together, and they are going to have sex that whole time, at least once per hour for the entire 24 hours. And so what it really ends up being is a 24-hour microcosm of relationships and the way they start and the way they go bad and the way they come back around. And sometimes you get really annoyed and sometimes things are wonderful for a while. And then it turns out that, your person is kind of a schmendrick and you don't necessarily like them all of the time. And I was really taken by the writing in this movie. And I realized after the fact that it didn't feel like, oh, we have to do a movie about a couple that are both women. And I went and I looked it up, and apparently the script was written thinking, okay, we can do a male and a female couple. When they cast the part of Sergio, the character who had been written as a man, they cast Leia Costa in the role, and they just made the movie. So it's really interesting to see the way the characters interact and your expectations. And, to some degree, my own internalized misogyny and the things that will pop up and you'll be like, oh, well, that feels weird. Why does that feel weird? And you kind of have to address some stuff in your own head while also looking at this movie. Now, it is a very, very sexual movie. It is a very much do not take anyone under 18 kind of flick. But if you get a chance to watch it, it's really amazing. And I have to say, Aaliyah Shawkat is just amazing. She is not just really, really cute. She's really talented. And I sat and I watched this movie for the first time and I went, I'm going to watch this again. And I'm going to watch this again because I feel like I kind of got distracted by bits and pieces of it that felt like, oh, here's a Hollywood set piece. Oh, here's a sex scene. Oh, here's a nude scene. So I watched it again, like almost immediately, and was just kind of paying attention to that central relationship. So when you're watching a film and all of this stuff is going on and you're not getting distracted by the nudity and what feels like maybe some gratuitous sex and Kumail Nanjiani, which is, worth the price of admission, definitely you want to check out Duck Butter. It's a movie that I really enjoy.
All right, Rodrigo, what do you have for your number 3 movie that begins with the letter D?
My number 3 movie that starts with the letter D is The Matrix. No, it's Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Nice.
Yeah, I think, like all the faithful, my faith in the MCU has wavered many times. And for some reason, I always thought that this movie was well regarded. Like it was, but it lives in, what is this, like wave 4?
Yeah.
Where basically people just weren't having it anymore. Whatever it was, they weren't having it anymore. So it's like Multiverse of Madness, Thor, Love and Thunder, Shang-Chi, like a lot of movies that I think people are kind of like meh on came out around the same time. But I think Multiverse of Madness is really good. I think, honestly, the big reason why people don't like it is because they were expecting something from it. They were like, finally, this is how we get the X-Men in the MCU, and it didn't do that, and they got mad.
Yeah.
But if you take the movie at its face, it's a really fun action movie that assassinates the character of Wanda after WandaVision double assassinated it, which is fun. And it's a Sam Raimi joint, so like it's so, I don't know, it's so dynamic in like a really weird way, which is exclusively a good thing. And honestly, it has like one of the most like comic book sort of resolutions or like final battle things that the Marvel universe has come out with. Like, it's like Doctor Strange taking control of zombie Doctor Strange to like, but yeah, it's really dorky and weird. And I really appreciate that. I really enjoyed that there's somebody named Xochitl in the cast. I didn't enjoy that they're kind of a very passive character. But maybe 17 years from now, when she makes it to an Avengers movie, we'll get a little bit more from her. So, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think would have probably been more well received had it been the first multiverse bit in the Marvel lineup. But I think we had one of the seasons of What If before this one came out. If I'm trying to maybe not, but I know that the multiverse had already been fully opened up, and of course it may have been Spider-Man the animated movie.
Well, we already had Loki, didn't we, before this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying is that the magic of what, use that not as a pun intended, but the magic of what could have been the multiverse and just how crazy that could have been might have been more impactful had the movie come out first in that whole line of multiverse stuff. So it's still a very good movie. I enjoy it very much.
The thing that's beautiful and awful about the MCU is that it is insistent in recreating the history of Marvel in cinematic form. That is to say, it makes all the same mistakes and as the comic books did at every possible way, except when the comic books made that mistake, it cost them $100,000 and they had to sell to Fleer. When Marvel makes that mistake, it costs like $30 billion and entire like industries fall over.
Yeah. Speaking of making the same mistakes twice, everybody should check out this week's Major Spoilers podcast pre-show, where we talk about maybe are we making the same mistake again? You can find that over on our Patreon page, patreon.com/Major Spoilers. All right, my number 3 in the top 5 is another detective story. This one is based on Walter Mosley's book, Devil in the Blue Dress. It's the title of the film is the same thing. What I like about Walter Mosley is he is a writer of color, and he has a very different take than what we would normally expect from your white-based hero who is a detective. In this case, Ezekiel Rollins, played by Denzel Washington, is an out-of-work aircraft employee, and he needs to make his mortgage. This is in a time when people can afford houses in Los Angeles, and there's a white PI looking for a missing white woman in black Los Angeles, and so he kind of hires Easy Rollins to find the woman, solve the case, and through it, it's very well done. By the way, I think it's an underrated film that people have kind of forgotten about. It came out in 1995. By the end of the movie, you can tell that this is the start of a detective series, which Mosley, of course, did do. But the problem is the movie didn't do well enough to get a franchise out of it. And it easily could have been a franchise film, but definitely worth checking out. I find it fascinating because this is kind of Denzel at his peak. And it's a story that you wouldn't expect Denzel to do, but very, very good. Devil in the Blue Dress, or in a Blue Dress, from 1995 is my number 3. Okay, let's get to our number 2s. And Matthew, what do you have for number 2?
I have long had a belief that there is a perfect superhero movie out there. It is a perfect superhero movie in that it manages to really span the entire superhero experience, in that it manages to be grim and gritty and dark. It manages to be silly. It manages to be over the top. It manages to be stupid. Really all of the things that the best comic stories are. And I feel like the real problem with the film is that it is so incredibly comic accurate, and it doesn't actually come from a comic. Now, you may be thinking, what starts with D? There's that one with Christian Bale. No, not that one. There's that one with Ben Affleck. Definitely not that one. No. I'm talking about 1990s Darkman, another Sam Raimi joint. And Darkman is just dead solid perfect. It is a distilled comic book experience on film. And I say that as someone who's read really more comic books than even I feel was probably worth the time and admission. But in the space of 96 minutes, we meet Liam Neeson, Dr. Peyton Westlake, who then ends up being attacked because he made a super secret plastic skin, I don't know, and he gets lit on fire by Larry Drake, who is, I think, best known as Dr. Giggles or the character from L.A. Law with a developmental disorder. But throughout this movie, he is chewing the scenery. He is the most evil thing you have ever seen. Awesome moment. I don't want to spoil it for you. Just know that when his cigar cutter gets involved, you don't want to look. But there is a scene in the movie that I think is just it's the only time I've ever seen an Alan Moore transition done on film. Because we see Dr. Peyton Westlake's wife, played by Frances McDormand from Fargo. We see her screaming that her husband is dead, and then the camera sort of pans with her, and then she is like, I don't know if it's CGI, if it's a transition, but she's changed into funeral clothing, and she's standing at his gravesite. And it's just one of those moments where you're like, that happened in the comics. That happened in Watchmen. I'm sure of it. And somebody started talking about, oh my gosh, we're all keeping our heads underwater and then everybody's drowning. No, it's like that. But if you have never seen Darkman, I want you to dedicate 96 minutes of your life to enjoying it, because it really is kind of the pinnacle of the pre-modern comic book era, the point where you couldn't just make a movie about Batman or Spider-Man or really any of those characters. You had to make a Dick Tracy movie that was secretly Batman, or you had to make a Phantom movie when you're actually trying to make, Captain America. You can't just go straight to the actual comic book material, because in 1990 it was still considered very déclassé, very lowbrow stuff. And honestly, the movie here is just as déclassé and lowbrow. Actually had a Marvel Comics adaptation after the fact. But yes, Darkman is my number 2. Very, very good movie. And it's the first thing that I remember Liam Neeson being in as a lead character. So that's kind of neat.
Very cool. Rodrigo, what is your number 2?
My number 2 is another movie that I'm going to sit here and defend. Everybody shut up. It's Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It is a good one. And I think it even did okay financially. But unfortunately, the overlords at Hasbro really, really wanted a absolute unquestioned smash hit, right? Which this movie was not. There were a lot of stuff working against it, some of which was bad will against Dungeons and Dragons that Hasbro itself had created. And it left this movie just kind of as a standalone thing, which is probably good. A sequel might have gone on to ruin it. But it's very good for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, it's just a decent little adventure movie. But reason number 2 is that it really captures the D&D party experience. Bunch of people that are there for their own motivations, that are interacting with this kind of awkward magic system, and frequently running into problems because of specifically how the spells work, right? There are here, there's a great scene where you get to ask some questions, and if you eat up your questions asking if you're supposed to ask the questions now, that's a problem. There is a scene where a concentration check is not made properly, and things get kind of out of control. And there's lots of little references to D&D stuff, but that's secondary to why this movie is good. If you were one of the people that got talked out of seeing this movie, you should track it down, especially if you've ever sat down to play D&D with your friends. It's again, or rather, there have been other D&D movies and other D&D projects, including video games too. And when I've sat down to watch them or play them, I think to myself, these people that made this game were afraid of what D&D is. They were like, we don't want this to be in the game's case, a turn-based dungeon crawler, and in a movie sense, a movie about a bunch of like just a bunch of guys trying to like do something, right? It has to be something else, and it has to have like all this other extra stuff. And it's like Honor Among Thieves really just feels like a Dungeons and Dragons game set in the Forbidden Realm or Forgotten Realms. Like it's just that, and it's well acted and well directed, and it does pretty well.
Yeah, it's got Chris Pine and a bunch of other good actors and actresses in it. And
Yeah,
they finally
Sean
answer the
Rodriguez.
question that's on everyone's mind: is it the head of an owl and a body of a bear, or a body of a bear with the head of an owl? And so they get that answer in that movie. So go check it out
You know-
just for that.
Just a quick tangent on that. You know that the current edition of D&D, when that movie came out, didn't allow druids to turn into owl
I
bears.
know,
So
I know,
when
right?
the movie came out, they like issued an errata that allows you to turn into an owl bear now.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. All right, my number 2, 1969. San Francisco, mostly, but most of California was terrorized by the Zodiac Killer, this anonymous person that was taunting the police and the government in trying to find him, sending coded messages, etc. It was a pretty scary time. In 1971, the Zodiac Killer becomes Scorpio, who is going around and killing people in San Francisco and demanding $1 million, or he's going to do something really, really bad. And it's up to Detective Harry Callahan to put a stop to this nonsense. And he's called Dirty Harry because he doesn't do things by the book. And if he needs to go and beat up a suspect, he'll go and do that to get a confession out of them. He has no problem going against his captain's orders to do what is quote unquote right. Harry's also a little bit of a racist in this. He has a Hispanic partner that he unleashes all of the slurs for Mexican people in the movie, but still loves him like a brother, right? But it's really good. It started off the entire Dirty Harry franchise. Of the entire franchise, I really think the first one is the best one. And if you haven't seen it, Dirty Harry is worth checking out, if for no other reason than to see Clint Eastwood say his famous lines about his gun and a bunch of other stuff. And in fact, the guy who plays Scorpio at the end, there are moments of that actor's performance that I feel were pretty much lifted by the actor who played the killer in Silence of the Lambs. There is so much overlap between those two characters that
Like Buffalo Bill.
Yeah, Buffalo Bill. Yeah. It's kind of weird in how I think they were drawing inspiration from the Scorpio character in Dirty Harry. But Dirty Harry, my number 2 movie of movies that begin with the letter D. Ladies and gentlemen, we have made it to the top of the charts. We've gone through 4 movies, and now it's time to reveal our number 1s. Matthew, what do you have for number 1?
As with so many things on this list, I want to preface this with a please don't judge me. Because my number 1 is a movie that I would not watch when it came out in 2007. And I accidentally ended up watching probably maybe even 10 years later. But when I sat down and accidentally watched Quentin Tarantino's Death Proof, or I think it had an alternate title because the whole thing, it was part of the Grindhouse movie experiment where 2 movies were put together and you could go and they were all cut together as though it was a Grindhouse movie from the 70s and you were in a drive-through somewhere. And I want to say the original title was like Bloody Mess on the Highway or some nonsense. But
Well, that was part of the joke within
Right,
the structure of the movie.
right, the narrative.
Right.
So
Because it's supposed
shouldn't
to
say
be
that was
in
the word.
universe a movie that was found from the 70s that's been like cobbled back together. Yeah.
Yeah. And Death Proof, of the 2 halves of the Grindhouse movie, first off, is the better movie. And the reason for that is one word, Kurt Russell. But if you have never seen this movie, it has eclipsed Pulp Fiction as my favorite Quentin Tarantino film. it has all of the things that you love about a Tarantino. It has all of the things that you hate about a Tarantino, but it has something that is truly remarkable in the first half of the movie, in that it has four female characters who are friends going off and having these, discussions and arguments and talking about what they're going to do with their night and their plans to go out to the lake for the weekend and all of the things they're going to do. And it's all really fun. It's all really entertaining stuff. And it's absolutely a feint. None of it is in any way meaningful to the story in the long run, but it's fascinating to watch. And then the second half of the movie has sort of a similar setup where you see a group of four young women again who are trying to go and have some fun. And in this case, borrow a 1970 Dodge Challenger. But the movie has, I think, a stronger identity than the other half. And most importantly, it feels like 3 or 4 different movies. So, and that may also be part of the thing, is that they cobbled together 3 or 4 different movies and then they did some stuff later and they put it all together. But it is truly fascinating. There is not a dull character in the film. And every one-shot person who shows up and says something, every side character seems to be somebody that you're like, oh, I want to know more about that schmuck. But you never do get to find out more about that schmuck. And eventually you do follow Kurt Russell, and he does get his just desserts and truly does end badly and deserve ending. It's got one of the most brutal endings I've seen. And keep in mind, this is Quentin Tarantino, who starts his movies with Marvin getting shot in the face. So if you've never seen Death Proof, go see it. You will see why it is my number one movie, what starts with a D.
Frederico, what do you have for your number one?
My number one was a bit of a surprise to me. I really thought that out of all of the Deadpools, I would like the first Deadpool, but actually, the more I thought about it, the more I really wanted to put Deadpool 2 up here. So then I did that, and that's what I did. Deadpool 2 probably does it for me because it. Okay, so Cable and Deadpool was a comic, or Deadpool and Cable, I think.
It was Cable and Deadpool.
Cable and Deadpool, yeah. Which was coming out at a time when I was reading a lot of Marvel comics, and I had a budget. So it's like I had to buy like X-Men comics and like specifically X-Men. And so a lot of the time I wasn't able to buy other stuff that I wanted to get, like Wolverine and Deadpool and like all of the one shots for other X-Men characters. I was reading a lot of X-Men back then. So eventually I went back, read it in the trades. And what Deadpool 2 does is it takes that and actually a couple other eras of Marvel comics and synthesizes them into like a pretty funny action movie. It takes characters that were trying very hard to be cool and utterly disrespects them.
Mhm.
It takes characters that were trying that exist in sort of a like parody world and does kind of justice to them in a lot of weird ways. Plus, all your favorites are back. Negasonic Teenage Warhead is in this. Yuki is in this. Unfortunately, TJ Miller is in this.
Yeah.
But this adds Sassy beats. They do Domino and they do it well. Like Domino is always kind of a second banana character in a lot of stuff, so it's nice for them to do Domino in a big way, right? And kind of just make her long shot, which is what they did. Anyway, this is getting to we're getting into the weeds. It's a good movie. I often end up going for the second movie because it doesn't have to deal as much with the exposition. Although this movie literally goes back and does like 2/3 of the first movie anyway. And I think it's good for it. So my number one movie that starts with D Deadpool 2.
Very cool. All right. My number one is an Alfred Hitchcock film, another crime thriller. My list is full of detective and crime thriller entries. It's 1954's Dial M for Murder. Now, based on a stage play, but it also stars Grace Kelly, focus of Alfred Hitchcock's. I would say he was obsessed with her to a point, maybe in not a good way. But this is where Grace Kelly's character is kind of being framed for murder, and her boyfriend / fiance has to figure out what's going on. And it's a race to prove that she's innocent before she's sent to hangman's noose or the pellet drop or whatever it is that's going to happen to her. It's pretty, for what it is, for a 1950s movie. It certainly doesn't dive into the dark noir like you might find from Double Indemnity, which probably should have been on this list here instead of Dial M for Murder. But it certainly brings some thrills, and I like how it's shot. It is in color, so it's not your black and white noir, which I think is also maybe a little bit of the failing, but it's also different to see this in color. And I think that the story is neat. What happens if you hear a murder taking place on the phone and then you have to try to prove that person's innocence? It's good. It's really enjoyable. If you haven't seen it, it's been a couple of years since I've seen it, maybe 6 or 7 years since I last sat down to watch it. But super enjoyable film, super interesting from start to finish. Maybe not Alfred Hitchcock's strongest movie, but definitely when it comes to the detective genre, Dial M for Murder is right up there with some of the best, and that is why it is my number one. What do you have as your number one, dear listener? Well, you can share in all the fun by heading over to our Discord server, and there's a link in the show notes, as well as a link to all the movies that begin with the letter D. And you can go over there and you can get into the top 5 channel, and you can share your top 5 movies that begin with the letter D. Other people will do it as well. Why? Because everyone loves a list. We will talk with you soon.
This podcast is copyright 2025 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.